Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I'm Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of Andromeda Gun by John Boyd. This is the book that came out in 1974. It's a classic sci-fi, obviously, by from Berkeley. Now I have to address the elephant in my room. Yes, this shirt is amazing. Look at it. So on the weekend, I went to a Star Wars burlesque show. I made the trek down to Toronto, and it was a lot of fun. It was so incredibly funny. So if this show gets to your city, I highly recommend, if you love Star Wars, to check it out. It is so funny. Yeah, it's funny. It's sexy. It's really, really good. And I can't. I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with this shirt. Anyway, uh, so this is one of my classic sci-fi book reviews. I'm going to do a spoiler-free review of the book and then apply my classic sci-fi bingo to see if it gets any bingos. Spoiler alert, I don't think so. This book is about 9/10 Western and 1/10 sci-fi. The Western aspect is quite fun if you like Westerns, but if you were hoping for more sci-fi antics, you might be a little bit disappointed. So what is this book about? G7, emissary of an alien race of energy beings, is sent to Earth to explore for energy sources his race needs. But when G7 takes over the body of Johnny McLeod, something happens. Instead of exercising total control, G7 is changed, involved in McLeod's personality and emotions. And Johnny McLeod, the immoral gunfighter, is changed too. Andromeda Gun is the story of a strange symbiosis of man and alien, and of crucial events upon which the future history of Earth depends. Johnny McLeod, G7, the symbiote, can change Earth's history. Sounds good, right? I was drawn to this because it reminded me of Time Spell, a story in this collection by Christopher Pike called Tales of Terror. It came out like the 90s. I was obsessed with this story, Time Spell, when I was probably like 15. It might be a bit ridiculous regarding certain aspects of the plot today, though, so I'm not going to reread it just so I can keep the nostalgia alive. But yeah, this story really reminded me of this because it's pretty much the same concept. So maybe he got it from this. I don't know. Let's get into the review. One of the things that was a little bit disappointing for me about Andromeda Gun was the kind of info dump at the start about G7. It'd be more interesting if we learned about its people kind of as we went. They are essentially ethereal light beings. The goal of these people, since they have nothing else to do, I guess, is to possess other beings and coerce them into being good. But what good means is not discussed. If they have no culture or even any sense of communal living, where does good come from? Like, where does this concept derive? What is inherently good? How do they determine this? They don't. We're meant to assume good as it pertains to our society in the 1970s, I suppose. This isn't necessarily a critique of the book, more an observation and just kind of something interesting that I thought about the book. I was like, how do these aliens know what good is if they don't have, like, why do they have a context for this? Where's their context coming from? Anyway, in terms of the story, Johnny is a criminal who has designs on robbing a bank. But as G7 begins to live within him, it begins to gently encourage him to mend his ways. G7 also gets horny for the mother of a woman it encourages Johnny to court, which was honestly hilarious to me. Also, by the way, despite on the back the alien using he pronouns, in the story the alien uses it pronouns. I'm not really sure. I'm just going to use what was in the book itself, which is it. So anyway, in case you were wondering. The book is quite funny. It's not meant to be taken seriously at all. In fact, at times it feels almost farcical. And while the plot was rather predictable, it's light and it's fun. I enjoyed it. I do think it needed a lot more kind of action on G7's part because a lot of the time I forgot G7 even existed. That's how much of a Western this really is. There were, though, some nice turns of phrase here and there. I'm going to read you a couple of them. Ian had lost the answer long ago, in the whine of Manet balls and the gut thrusts of bayonets. Violence had borne his gentleness away, and the being within, judging the man with abstract compassion, held him blameless. I thought that was interesting. And then we have... Seize the day, G7 thought. Don't conserve it. Time's value lay in its transience. Burn time into the soul with fires of passion. Better time's traces remain as a scar than it be allowed to wane, unmarked and unremembered. YOLO, basically, I guess. So, yeah. Overall, if you liked the movie Cowboys and Aliens, I guess, if you like Westerns, and if you like possession stories, this isn't the bad little one, though it's kind of forgettable. It's like a solid 3-star book. I'm going to move into my classic sci-fi bingo. So there's not going to be a lot here, as most of the story is a Western. So anything pertaining to kind of like future of humanity is not really applicable. But there is some fun stuff in the book I want to talk about. There's nothing from outdated science all the way to sexy female scientists, though. Cool aliens, I'm going to give it this one just because they are kind of cool. I wish they had a bit more explanation to like their culture and their society and the stuff I talked about in my review, but they're fun. I always like a kind of alien possessing people story, so sure, it can have a check mark. Alien human romance. Yes. So G7, as it lives in Johnny's body, begins to enjoy experiencing the emotions and physical aspects of said body. While Johnny himself didn't seem to be interested in women initially, more intent on his bank robbery than, landing a wife, G7 pushes him towards this woman, Gabriella, a teacher. But when Johnny meets Liza, Gabby's mother, G7 begins to get the hots for her. In the end of the story, Johnny finds that Liza is actually more compatible to him, so they get together, while Gabriella marries this other guy she liked initially. It's honestly quite interesting, that dynamic, and I really liked it. It was kind of fun. Oh, and there's also a passage that absolutely killed me. This passage is a bit risque. Through the fibers of its host, G7 had felt the woman's pull, and, more than its host, it appreciated the electromagnetic vortices swirling around breast gravities whose amplitudes left Ian unstirred. Perhaps McLeod, because of his professional reliance on fast horses, was more appreciative of lean flanks, G7 mused, whereas itself, a star rover, was more aesthetically aware of world lines. Whatever the cause, it was apparent to G7 that on this planet it was a breast angel, while its host was a thigh man. The best classic sci-fi quote I've ever read in my entire life. That is so funny. I don't know if you find it as funny as I do. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, moving on. Generation ship to cyberpunk. We don't have any of that. So I'm still laughing at this. Sexism. In the sense of the 1800s culture, yeah, of course. But not in the narrative, actually. It doesn't get a check mark. Still, I'll talk about the women for a second, as they're fun. So Gabriella and Liza are funny because they have this prim, young... We have the young, prim and proper school teacher and her gregarious, sexually motivated mother. They also have complete opposite body types, so I thought it was great that Johnny found them both attractive, and personality was his main factor in choosing between them. And Gabriella, despite being less forceful than her mother in terms of personality, is also a strong female character and motivated. There's a guy she likes, but he's a Mormon, and she refuses to marry him because she doesn't think she'll be valued as a wife, given that he can have multiple wives because, polygamy. Liza, on the other hand, at one point enters into a standoff with a shotgun and also stands up for her daughter and claims that she's the head of the household and will make all the decisions. In truth, I loved Liza. I thought she was fantastic. Their appearances are focused on quite a bit, though, which was actually kind of more funny because it was the alien doing it more than Johnny himself. So Johnny's name, actually, he goes by Johnny Loco, but his real name is Ian McLeod, and the book kind of jumps between this. So if I say Johnny or Ian, it's the same person. Foreigner technology? Yes, we actually have this. So G7 has a rock-like spaceship that it uses to fly around. But the ship, because they just think it's a giant rock, they end up making it into the foundation of a public bathroom. This book is so weird. And it's apparently there to this day. We don't have anything from LGBTQ plus to male MC. I mean, unless we consider that Ian/Johnny is demisexual, but I don't think that was supposed to be the case. I think he was just very distracted by his bank robbery. Racial equality. No. There are no people of color in this book as characters, but this book does have a bit of an issue with an insensitive depiction of indigenous peoples. There are some offhanded comments by characters that are racist or stereotypical, which would have made sense for the time period, but it didn't need to be included at all to further the story, so those could have just been removed. Likewise, an indigenous woman is highly eroticized at one point, and there is a white savior narrative that creeps up near the end. So yeah, not the best for racial equality in this book. Now, post-apocalyptic to text and literature today, we have nothing. The Bechdel test? No, surprisingly. Despite Liza and Gabriella being in the story quite a bit and having good character development, they don't talk to each other about anything but Johnny, and they're never on the same page alone together to talk. This is probably because the story follows G7 so closely, but yeah, I was kind of like, oh, that's too bad. But whatever. I mean, that one's more like oh wow, this actually passed more than an expectation. So yeah, no, this book is pretty fun. But yeah, you really have to like westerns though to like it. If you don't like westerns, you won't like it because, as I said, it's like majorly a western. But I actually really like westerns, so I thought it was really fun. And if you've read this book, let me know in the comments. And if you like my shirt, let me know in the comments. You can't see it. Oh, this damn thing! I need to get one of those like ones in my ear. Yeah. So thanks.